Welcome back to the Positive Gains Podcast. Today, my special guest is Miss Ashley Stanley. You may have seen her on TikTok, Facebook. She's doing a lot of great things, helping out athletes with their social media. She's talking about NIL, branding, all the major platforms. So if you have an athlete or you're thinking about maybe your kid trying to tackle social media at the next level, this is the perfect person that we're talking to today. Ashley, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
A bit of background information, just whatever you'd like to share, and how you got started into where you're at today.
So I feel like I have a really unique perspective when it comes to all different aspects of like working with student athletes, right? I was a competitive gymnast when I was little. I'm a two-time Division I national champion for cheerleading. And I've also coached gymnastics in high school. And now my husband and I have two children who are in a highly competitive athletic environment. And so as they had started to really excel in their careers as athletes, it just became more and more evident to me the importance that social media was going to play, not only in their high school career, but their college career as well. And this is something that I started thinking about far before NIL was even a thing. But my background in social media, because I have a kinesiology degree, I was a personal trainer forever. I worked in cardiac rehab. I managed fitness centers. But then I decided when Cayman was born that I wanted to be a little more in control of my schedule. So I started learning how to use social media. I started studying personal branding and marketing, and I have been able to generate multiple seven figures of extra income for our family using social media. And I knew that was skills that I wanted to pass on to our kids. And as I started thinking about it, I thought, you know what, this can be beneficial for everyone. So that's really how all this got started.
Wow. And did you think that, because maybe you didn't really have the plan that maybe you wanted to go. So could you see yourself doing, if I go back 15, 16 years, do you think you would have led to where you're at right now?
I don't think so, because when I got on, we didn't have social media for the longest time. And so I come at that with a unique perspective as well. So I never used social media for entertainment. When I started using social media, it was strictly to build a business and build an income. And that's really where my unique perspective comes in, because I didn't have to relearn, transitioning from using it for entertainment to using it for something else. And I feel like that's where a lot of not just adults who are also promoting themselves on social media really have a challenge, but also, the challenge comes when our children are using social media for entertainment, but now college coaches are using social media for researching, for recruiting. And so I didn't see myself here, but I couldn't see now I can't see myself doing anything else. So it was a pleasant surprise.
And social media is elevated from the times of like MySpace, and I remember like back in 2000, maybe 7, 8, 9, like Huddle was real big. I don't know if it still is now.
Yeah,
and then you had Twitter that came in, I think around 2009, and so now it's just continuing. There's so many different platforms, and so just in your perspective, what do you think about the elevation of social media with so many platforms now?
So that can be a really tricky one, because there are so many different platforms. And of course, Twitter is a huge one for college or whatever it's called now, which brings me to a little bit of my point. Is one of the things that I really like to focus on is I like to focus on principles. I like to focus on teaching, personal branding and marketing principles, things that are going to stay constant, or at least somewhat constant, in the very rapidly evolving landscape of not just social media, but of college recruiting, especially with the transfer portal, with NIL deals. I mean, things are just, you never know from one month to the next. So that's what I really like to focus on with social media, is principles that you can apply for literally the rest of your life, across platforms, across, sports, across careers. This isn't just for the next, 4 years of your life. You could potentially use this for the next 40.
And the crazy thing is, like you were talking about the portal. I was talking to a coach a while back, and he had pulled up the number just off the DBs alone in football that were in the portal, and the number was insane. And he was like, "This is a daily thing, man. Just check in and check in." And he had tied it into social media. Talking about where guys are just athletes. One to the next. One day, I'm going to be here, and then the next, I'm going to be over there. And then as a fan, it's kind of hard to, if you're a diehard fan of your school, obviously you're going to root with them, but it's kind of hard to get attached to some of the athletes because they might be leaving you.
Right.
So on top of social media, the portal, it's just a never ending cycle. There's always something else going, which is crazy.
Yes. And I will tell you, I think that is one of the really important reasons for athletes to build a personal brand. A lot of times, a lot of athletes previous to, learning more about social media, they just take on the identity of the school.
Right.
They become the school. But now what you're seeing is you're seeing athletes are becoming their own brand, which will, I do believe, make it a little bit easier for the athletes and the fans because I do feel like their fans are attaching themselves more to the actual athlete as a brand as opposed to the school as a whole, if that makes sense. Their social media is giving fans an easier way to get an insight into an athlete beyond just their sport. They're now getting to know them as a person. So that is a big difference.
And when a parent would maybe reach out to you, and because there's a lot of parents that they're on social media, they're not really sure about their kids being on social media, but they understand that this is the new wave now, that maybe the letters in the mail just aren't going to get it done anymore, that this is quicker. So when parents reach out to you, what are some of the things that they're a little apprehensive about social media?
So, of course, and I was talking about this yesterday. Parents innately want to protect their children. And what I run into a lot is that they want to protect their children from social media. And I completely get it. I mean, there are definitely things you want to be aware of. There are things that you want to look out for. So when I talk to parents and student athletes about social media, I like to come at it from a standpoint of transparency. First of all, like this is what you might be able to expect when you get on social media because you're right, it's not all positive. And and just like an aspect of education. And I really feel like that's where I haven't seen, and I hope to be more of a bridge, is providing education for these athletes on how to best use social media. But for parents, a lot of the questions, the main question that I get is, when do I know it's the right time, for my athlete to start using social media? And so I always say you need to ask them these two questions. One, are they ready to be responsible for what they post? Because coaches and their staffs, and they're going back through years of potential recruits social media. So are they ready to be responsible for what they're posting? And are they ready to put the best versions of themselves out there? Not a different version of themselves. I do not like that. I just mean like the best version of themselves. If they're ready for that responsibility, you're halfway there. But the next question, and truly probably one of the most important questions, and this is where you see a lot of people really have to stop and think about it, is that athlete emotionally ready to handle the potential criticism that can come with putting yourself out there online? Whether it is from peers, whether it is from adults, whether it is from random people with, no profile pictures, no names, no videos, but opinions about absolutely everything. If an athlete's not emotionally ready to handle that kind of thing, then it could be a situation where it's not the right time. If it's going to be more hurtful than it is going to be helpful, then I always recommend, give it a little bit, wait, see if your feelings about it change. And even though I do teach social media for athletes, I'm 100% transparent. And I will tell you, social media is not 100% necessary to get recruited these days. Is it an advantage? Absolutely. Is it necessary? No. So student athletes can absolutely get recruited without social media. I never want parents to think that, oh my God, just because they don't have Instagram or a Twitter or, something, they're just have no chance. And that's just not the case. But it is a big advantage.
And I can't remember if it was you or somebody else that had posted that. How did it go? Your social media is not your friends. Was that you that posted that?
Yes, I think it was Mel Robbins, and she is the best. And I wish I could do her justice in saying what she said, but it's a wonderful, wonderful way to look at it. And she said, it's not for, social media is not for your friends. It is not for your family. It is literally for people who are looking for your content, whether you're putting it out there to, educate, entertain, empower maybe your peers or just anybody. That's who social media is for. It's for people that are looking for you. It's not for, like I said, it's not for entertainment. When you step into a certain level of what you choose to use it for, it becomes more about, how you can impact other people.
And that leads me into, kind of the elephant in the room with a lot of people, right? We've seen this story time and time again. So, how can a negative social media platform, affect an athlete's recruitment from, something they post, that their scholarship gets yanked, hanging out with people they're not supposed to be hanging out with. Like, kids don't really understand the magnitude. And I think sometimes they see people on TV and it happens to them and they're like, wow, that'll never be me. And then it happens to them. And then, now what? So, if you would explain, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I always like to say screenshots last forever. So you have and that's, like I said, that's the number one thing that I ask parents. Are they ready to be responsible for what they're presenting online? Because it can be looked at for years and years to come. And, like I said, if a coach is using social media as a recruiting tool, but your athlete is still using social media strictly for entertainment, you could see where there could be a massive disconnect that could create problems. Like you said, rescinded scholarships. But athletes are losing opportunities, recruiting money every single day that they didn't even know that they had, because now coaches have the luxury of sitting in their office doing their research into athletes,
Mhm.
from a personal standpoint, from not just an athletic, not just a stats. Stats are what they are, but you want to make sure you're also getting a good person, because the athlete becomes the face of the team, the face of the university or wherever school they end up. And now they don't have to leave their office to do that. They're doing their research before potentially even making that first contact. So it's very important, if you have an athlete that wants to play their sport at a higher level, or you are an athlete that wants to play your sport at a higher level, to really be aware of, how you're presenting yourself online.
And one thing that I hear a lot too in this area, so we're in a small rural area, and a lot of people, they want the best for their kids, right? And they want them to succeed. They want them to be able to get some of these opportunities that some of these other kids have. But the thought is amongst some, well, we live in a small area. There's no way that anybody from here is going to be able to make that unless something happens, or you funnel all this money and you're able to go elsewhere. They're like, no one's ever been able really to do it from smaller areas. So my opinion, and I don't know if you'll agree, is I think you got to find out what's important for your athlete, and exactly where they're coming from, exactly where they're going to fit. A college coach had told me once before that sometimes you don't go where you want to go. Sometimes you go where you're needed, depending on playing time and stuff like that. So,
Absolutely.
what's your experience and thought process for some of these parents in these smaller areas that might have those same thoughts?
Coming from a small town perspective, because my husband played at Mississippi State. He
Okay.
grew up his whole entire life in a very small town. It literally had one red light. And this was back in the days where you made VHS tapes and you made copies and you mailed them to coaches. So for athletes in smaller areas, while they may not be getting as much exposure because they're not at the bigger schools, they're not competing as big of stages in the high school years, they have the opportunity now with social media to reach a wider audience, to cast a wider net. And they also have the opportunity to control how much effort they put into their own recruiting process. So I always like to tell people, like I said earlier, social media is not necessary for recruiting, but it is an enhancement, and it should be considered an enhancement for an athlete's offline efforts to do their part in the recruiting process. Gone are the days where you can sit around and wait for the coaches to come find you, especially if you are in a smaller town. But that doesn't mean that you can't get recruited to the right fit for you.
You know, a parent comes up to you and they're saying, "Hey, I just need some help. You know, I know that you have a lot of expertise with social media. What are just a few tips that you can share that might help some of the parents and the students?"
Absolutely. So you want to make sure that your bios are set up properly for your student athletes. You want to make sure that for whatever sports you play, there's just too many to go into specifics, but whatever your sport is, what are the most important stats that coaches are wanting to see from you? Those should be very apparent in your bio. So if a coach searches you, which will bring me to my next point, you want to make sure that they get a quick snapshot of things that they're looking for right when they get to your page. You also want to make sure that your handles on social media are your first and last name. I had this come up with our son, and he would probably be so upset with me, but I'm going to share this with you guys because maybe it will save somebody else. So he had a really great meet, and he ended up, he's a track and field athlete. He's a 5 or 6 time All-American. He won his first national championship last year. He's going into his senior year. Had a great meet. He ended up getting featured on Mile Split on Instagram, which has hundreds of thousands of followers. Well, his Instagram handle is not his first and last name. So at the beginning of our journey with him, my husband and I actually created an Instagram account that is his first and last name. And although we don't use it, that is the one that got tagged because they knew it was him. So if you want to make sure that coaches can find you while they're doing their research, make sure it's got your real first and last name in your handles. Make sure it is your face. Make sure that they can tell that it's you. It's a nice, clear picture. If you want to be in your jersey so that they can make sure that if you're a John Smith among the millions of other John Smiths, that if they're looking for a John Smith that goes to whatever school, they can actually tell that it's you. When we're talking about profile pictures for social media platforms, I would suggest using the same profile picture across all platforms to start not only creating that brand identity for yourself, but also to make it easier for coaches to find you and recognize you. The easier you can make it for coaches, the more recruitable you make yourself.
The more recruitable. Wow. What about, I know you have something coming up, the Recruiting Ready virtual workshop. If you would talk about that a little bit.
I would absolutely love to. So this was not a direction that I thought that I would go, but I was getting, and still do every single day, I get questions constantly, and from parents. And a lot of parents do not know anything about the recruiting process. The questions are, I don't know what to do. I don't know when to start. I don't know where to start. I don't even know the questions to ask. And what it really comes down to is they just don't know what they don't know. And I thought, you know what? These parents need some education because, especially like you said, kids in smaller towns, people that, may not have coaches that have connections. Parents are their first line of support to help them get to that next level. And we, as athlete parents, we invest so much to give our children the best of the best opportunities. But now in these times with how things are changing, sometimes we have to invest in ourselves to make sure
Right.
that we can give them the best support. So this is not a recruiting service. It's not a how to get your athlete recruited. It's literally just a very, very basic foundational knowledge of the recruiting process. So we're going to talk everything from how the recruiting process has changed. We're going to talk about evaluating where your student athlete is in the recruiting process, things to think about along the way, considerations when you're looking at certain colleges, making sure it is the right fit, and things to be aware of that a lot of people just don't think about, beyond just a college name. We're going to be talking about attention, which goes right into social media, how to get the right kind of attention, emails, do's and don'ts that athlete parents absolutely need to be aware of. And then we're really going to talk about the roles of the parent in the recruiting process and the athlete in the recruiting process, because the athlete really needs to be the main player and that parent really needs to be in the supporting role. And so those are all the things that we're going to talk about. I've designed it where people can watch it live or they can catch the replays, because I know school is starting. Athlete parents, nobody's ever on the same schedule. And so it's going to be one of those things that, you'll have access to. And hopefully, just like I said, be that bridge to start, helping not only the athletes, but also the parents educate themselves a little bit more about the recruiting process. But that starts August 14th.
And how do people sign up for that?
So you can visit athletesocialacademy.com/workshop, and that will take you straight to where you can secure your spot. I would absolutely love to have you. I will be teaching this several times, probably over the next few months. And you'll have access to all of it. Anytime I update any materials, anytime I update recordings, you get access to all of it for less than a pair of cleats.
You guys have got to sign up for that. Like, it's a great deal. There's so many people, like you said, that just are unaware and unsure. And, what better way than to get, a lot of the answers that you have, questions, answered. So please check that out. And that kind of leads me into my next thing is the Sports Parent Collective group.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the group. And I think that you can't be too afraid to experience something new as far as learning.
Mm-hmm.
And, just from what I've seen, people are posting, you post too as well. You're the leader of the group, and it's very informative. That's the big thing. And so, I'm appreciative of that. So thank you for that. But yeah, please explain the Sports Parent Collective group on Facebook.
Well, I appreciate that. And I am so glad to have you in there, and that this is new. So it's only, I only launched it, I think probably not even 2 months ago, but I really wanted a place for sports parents to be able to connect. Sometimes you don't always have that community, or sometimes in the sports world, it gets so competitive that sometimes you just need a place to ask questions outside of your circle. You need an outside perspective, or you just need a place where you can celebrate your athletes, where you can ask questions, get support, and get connected with other, people that are on the same journey as you. Not everybody has athletes that are wanting to go to the next level, but everybody with athletes, experiences similar things. And so it really is just for community, for support. I've really enjoyed it. It's just another way that I can try to, provide help to just basically anybody, parents, student athletes. But I've enjoyed it, and we're just getting started. It really gives me a great insight also, because I do ask a lot of questions in there, and it's given me great insight as to what parents are actually looking for as far as knowledge, or what they are challenged with being a sports parent. And it also allows me to introduce people, like I interviewed the kids' mental coach from the last 2 years. I interviewed him, and he's worked with Kane for the last 2 years, and he was such an important part of his, sophomore and junior year, just making sure that we're taking care of the whole athlete, not just the body, but also the mind. And so it's just another way for me to share, my people with more people.
I see a podcast in your future.
I've thought about it.
I caught some of that with that interview, and I think that's kind of a forgotten thing with mental health and younger athletes. I think a lot of times we think about the adults, but sometimes we have a tendency to forget about the kids. And I don't know if I could be a kid in this day and age with everything that's going on and social media. So yeah, that is great that there is a mental health coach that's able to tap in with them.
Yes. And so many, there's not many programs that have that just yet. Fortunately, we moved from a small town in Texas less than 2 years ago for the kids to attend IMG Academy. So we've seen, different aspects of different programs at different levels. And I will say that was one of the major benefits that I saw, was having him readily available, having them travel, with the team, to address, not just the physical, like I said, not just the physical part of competition, but also what athletes can encounter, during the competition season, or literally during the competition right before races. It was a very, very helpful tool to have in your tool belt.
That's outstanding. And where are you at on social media for anybody that wants to contact you or just check out the content?
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me on TikTok at the Athlete Social Coach, and on Instagram at the Ashley Stanley. And I would love to have you hopefully share some knowledge with you. All my Athlete Social Academy resources you can find in the links in my bios on those. And just like to have a good time on there, spread some positivity, a few laughs.
Well, thank you so much for being on. It's been very informative. This will help a lot of people. I always say it, I've always learned something new from everybody. So again, as a parent with an athlete, this is great for me and beneficial. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy day.
Absolutely. I would love to be on again. So thank you for having me.
Sure thing. Anytime.